Okay, we're going to continue our study of the environmental issues. Does anybody know what Saturday is? Earth Day. Okay, since 1970, April 22nd is Earth Day. So we will get a little bit of a barrage of environmental propaganda coming our way this weekend and so forth. Anyway, all right, so let's review what is the environment. All right, so this is a definition that you need to remember. And dandelion picture here, and we'll keep our dandelion theme today. The environment. What is the environment? It's everything around us. It's our surroundings. That includes both the earth, the unliving, and all the animals and plants around us, the living. So the environment is everything in the natural world around us, both living and non-living. So we've got a couple different definitions, and it's easy to get them mixed up. So when we're talking about the environment, we're talking about everything around us, our surroundings. But that's too vague to study. So when we're talking about a particular region, we're going to call it an ecosystem. That's a portion of the environment that we can center in on and study. A lot of you on the quiz mixed up community and habitat. Well, you didn't really mix them up. You defined them in much the same way. Community is not a place. Community is the living things in the environment, all the living things in a particular part of your ecosystem. So community, we think of with people, we think of it as a place maybe, but actually the community is not. The community is the people who live in a certain place. So with environmental issues, the community is the living things. The community includes the living things in the ecosystem. The place is the habitat. And of course, a habitat kind of has the idea of being the ideal place for an organism to live. So make sure you get your definitions down. And I want to also begin with a review of what should your view of the environment be. We can't possibly go through all the different environmental issues. Different things will come up, things change, so we need to make sure we have a proper view, and our view needs to be based on the Bible. I think if you look at Psalms chapter 8, Psalms chapter 8 is a good foundation because, of course, if we have a biblical worldview is a very specific worldview. It's kind of a subdivision, I guess, of theistic worldview, so don't get those two mixed up. What is a theistic worldview? That's where the absolute truth is the existence of one God. Of course, that includes Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so forth. So if we have a biblical worldview, what is the biblical worldview? That one God is the God of the Bible, and several of you are missing the second part. The Bible is the key to understanding the world around us. Make sure you include both parts. So yes, the God of the Bible is the one true God. He has revealed himself to us in his word, the Bible. And then we have to take it a step further. The Bible is the key to understanding the world around us. So then the Bible is the key to understanding what a proper view of the environment is. That's why we want to look for a minute at Psalms chapter 8. You can see we do have, let's get the lazy pointer. There it is. We do begin with creation. When I consider thy heavens, what did we say about God? Our proper view of the environment has to include a proper view of God and a proper view of man. So all of those things you need to retain. What is the proper view of God? What is the proper view of man? So we talked about it being thy heavens. So what does that tell us about God? God is the owner. Okay? He's the creator and the owner. The work of thy fingers. Then it goes into detail. Then we can progress through here to then what is the proper view of man? All right, we talk about the proper view of man. Here's the rest of Psalm chapter 8. What do we find in Psalm chapter 8 that we first saw in Genesis? What is it? Dominion. Okay, so we have to have a proper view of God. He created the environment, he controls the environment, and he determines man's place in it. That's the proper view of the environment. right? And so Psalms chapter 8 gives us a good foundation for several things there in our biblical worldview. So here again is the biblical worldview. All right, it's a very specific thing. And as we're talking about the environment, we want to look at the environment through the eyes of the Bible. The Bible is the key to understanding the world around us. Okay, so you remember, proper view hinges on the proper view of God. Who is God? He's the sovereign creator. And that is an important word. He created and controls it, so that's why we have the idea of sovereignty, the sovereign creator. The idea of a sovereign in this, name for God is important. All right, and then proper view of man. Man is not on the same level as anything else in the so-called community, is he? Man is God's special creation. And then a proper understanding of the environment begins with the fact that God creates it and controls it. And we're going to see that when we deal with two environmental issues today. You've seen this slide before. You've got to retain this. How does each of the worldviews affect the view of the environment? All right. Of course, we remember for theism and biblical, we have to approach the environment through the lens of what? Stewardship. What tends to be the case if we are materialistic and atheistic? We're going to want to profit off the environment. And even many people who are on the environmental issues bandwagon, a lot of them are out for the money. There's a lot of money to be had in environmental issues. But of course, we've talked about environmentalism. What is environmentalism? It's an extreme view of the environment, and it becomes very pantheistic. So when we're talking about the New Age environmental type worldview, it is very pantheistic. Mother Nature is a God substitute. Okay? So here's our proper view of the environment. There's the foundation that it rests on. Make sure you understand that. The proper view of the environment is that God created and controls it, and he determines man's place in it. And that rests, first of all, on the proper view of God, and the proper view of man. That will give us the proper view of the environment. So, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, and that's because, I don't know. There is the proper view of the environment. And I want to review Bible principle. Again, we can't go through all of the different issues that you're going to face. We can't go through all the different problems with pollution. We can't go through all the different problems. The environment is very highly complex. So we need to know what we think about the environment and from the Bible why we think that way. Remember, if the environment was created by God, it should display both design and order. And there's the verses. The environment has purpose. What is that purpose? It's dual. Both God's glory and pleasure and man's use. Then we said that the environment is corrupted. What happened? The fall of man. Man's sin and man's disobedience. We no longer have a perfect environment. We have a very complex environment, and there are going to be environmental problems. To continue, there we know that God has given man dominion, but with dominion comes what? Stewardship. And then last of all, it's important to remember that God maintains direct control over the environment. So do we have to worry about this global catastrophe that they're calling climate change? We don't. So we don't have to jump on the environmental bandwagon and spend lots of time and money fighting for the planet. Okay, that's not biblical. But on the other hand, neither is pollution and wastefulness and so forth. It's got to be balanced. So what should our proper view of the environment be? Okay, there's kind of two choices, and we want to make sure we're on the correct end of those choices. So we're going to talk for just a minute and review stewardship versus environmentalism. Okay? Your view of the environment needs to come out of the Bible principle of stewardship, not just dominion, but also stewardship. You notice I've said here that we're going to view the environment as if it were God's. Why? Because it is God's. Remember our 5 attributes of God. We said God is eternal. That means he's outside of space and time. But we also said that God is our creator. And then we kind of made it a little more broad than that. Not only is God our creator, God is the creator. God is the owner, the sustainer, the judge. So when we have a proper view of God, we're going to not only view the environment as created by God, but we're going to view our place as not only having dominion, but also stewardship over the environment. So there's the 3 concepts that we're going to center in on later on when we talk about appropriate environmental solutions. They do involve conservation. There's nothing wrong with recycling, okay? Even though all those things have kind of been hijacked by environmentalism and extreme environmentalists, that doesn't mean you shouldn't recycle, we shouldn't try to use less, and we shouldn't try to be more responsible, which is wise use. And then innovation. I think one of the biggest solutions to environmental problems is new technology. All right, so then on the other hand, we do have environmentalism. There's the definition of environmentalism. It's when our view of the environment becomes extreme and we overemphasize the importance of the environment, or we overemphasize habitats in the environment, or we overemphasize animal species in the habitat. So, and this of course is very pantheistic, as we mentioned. You need to associate environmentalism with a pantheistic worldview. And of course, there's always the political side of environmentalism, as we see with climate change, global warming, or whatever they're calling it today. Politics of environmentalism. Mentioned this 3 times now. Green is the new red. What does that mean? Of course, you're not old enough to remember the Cold War, right? Heard of the Cold War? You even know what it is, or was. Okay? Back in the 50s, in particular, the biggest threat and the biggest political issue going on was communism. Okay? And of course, the euphemism for communism was red. All right, well, I don't think anybody's worried about communism taking over our country from the USSR, which is no longer in existence. Okay, but so our political threat does not come from outside, doesn't come from communism, doesn't come from the former Soviet Union. It comes from the inside with all of these radical environmentalists. Okay, especially in the 90s and in early 2000. So there was a lot of environmental politicking going on. Now it's just a little more covert and less overt. So it is a political tool. And it's also a money-making tool. So a lot of environmentalists are not actually as environmental as they might portray themselves. Case in point was Al Gore. Okay, but the problem with environmentalism is now that we're a decade later than the Inconvenient Truth and other political environmental propaganda. The problem now is that we have had a whole decade or 2 decades of our children being indoctrinated with environmentalism. So environmentalism becomes political. Okay, now let's talk today's lecture in more detail, environmental problems. All right, you can get on the internet and get all kinds of propaganda. So let's begin with a little propaganda, okay? This is from the website inhabitat.com. I'm a little confused at why they're calling themselves that, Inhabitat. Okay, I don't know if what they're promoting with that, but top 6 environmental issues. This is from Earth Day 2016. Okay, so here's the first problem: soil erosion. I'm just giving this to you as an example. Soil erosion. What do you see in the picture? That's extreme. That's propaganda. Okay? The scorched earth. So we have soil problem. Let me read what goes along with this slide off the internet. Unsustainable industrial agriculture practices have resulted in soil erosion and degradation that leads to less arable land, clogged and polluted waterways, increased flooding, and desertification, meaning changing everything into a desert. That's what we're seeing in the picture. Loss of biodiversity. So we pick a tree frog, the symbol of the rainforests. How many different millions, billions of species do you think there are? Is it in the millions or is it in the billions? We'll talk about species extinction later. So increasing human encroachment on wildlife habitats is causing a rapid loss of biodiversity. Biodiversity, you'll see that a lot. We've got to maintain biodiversity. We can't have species extinction. This threatens food security, health, world stability. Climate change is a major contributor, and so on. Wait a minute. Climate change is also a major contributor to biodiversity loss, as some species aren't able to adapt to changing temperatures. Wait a minute. Why are we getting in the way of evolution? Right? Don't we believe in survival of the fittest? Isn't some species extinction just a normal part of evolution? So we have a little bit of inconsistency here. Here's the next problem on this website for last year's Earth Day. Scarcity of water. Okay? As the population increases and climate change causes more droughts, water scarcity is becoming more of an issue, as only 3% of the world's population is freshwater, and 1.1 billion people lack access to clean, safe drinking water. Next, deforestation. Okay. It is estimated that 15% of total greenhouse gas emissions come from deforestation. Oh, we are back to greenhouse gases and climate change. You've all heard about carbon footprint and carbon dioxide and big bad carbon emissions and so forth. What do you think the number one source by far is of carbon dioxide? The ocean. Okay. All of our man-made carbon emissions are a mere drop in the bucket, but they're not going to tell you that. Pollution, skull and crossbones. I don't know where they got that picture. And of course, here it is with the, look at the picture. What do you always see with climate change? Polar bear. We got to make an emotional appeal in our propaganda. Listen to this first phrase on this that goes with this picture on the website. While 97% of climate scientists agree that global warming is occurring and greenhouse gas emissions are the main contributor. What is that? Propaganda. Scientific consensus. It's one of their tactics. It says next, the political will has not been strong enough, thank goodness, so far, to initiate a massive policy shift. What did we say this is? Green is the new red. This is a political tool. We want a massive policy shift away from fossil fuels and towards sustainable forms of energy. Think wind farms. We won't even know the wind farms. They are not very economically feasible. So when we're talking about environmental concerns, like the 6 that you just saw, are they real? Okay. Well, that's not a simple yes or no answer, but they are real. There are environmental issues, but what's the problem with environmental issues? What is the problem with environmentalism? It's overemphasis. It's extreme. All right, so there are environmental issues. Oh, there's global warming. There's global warming again. What do you see right underneath global warming? Can you read that? overpopulation. And the whole time we're dealing with this, I want you to remember and have down somewhere the 4 tactics of environmentalists. What is the first one? Manipulate, right? And distort data and facts to the point of lying. I think I said fabrication, nice way to say lying. That was the first tactic. Manipulation of data. And they're being very dishonest when they say 97% of climate scientists agree. That is simply not true. That is a lie. All right. The other tactic is they predict alarming consequences. You saw that poor little plant in the dried, scorched earth. So we're going to predict dire consequences. What was the third tactic? We're going to blame the wrong causes. What's the cause of all of our environmental? You and I are the cause of all our environmental issues. Overpopulation. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about the true picture. Are environmental issues real? The answer is yes. Are there concerns in the environment? Yes. But the first thing I want you to realize is that these environmental problems, whether we're talking about pollution or we're talking about soil erosion and soil degradation, they're local problems that apply to specific ecosystems and specific countries. I really don't think we can put any of these issues on a global scale. And that's the thing that we want to do when we politicize environmental issues. We want to make it global. We want to make it so that the government has to do something. And that simply is out of proportion, overblown, and extreme. But that doesn't mean we don't have pollution issues. But do we have pollution issues globally? No. There are pollution issues in third world countries. There's a lot of pollution issues and other environmental concerns in China. Okay, China does not have a proper worldview, do they? They're exploiting the environment. The government is. But the true picture with environmental issues is that they are regional. That's probably a better word than local. They're local, regional, they apply to specific ecosystems. We can't apply them globally. All right, so they are not on a global scale. Talk about global climate. We'll be talking about climate change in an entire lecture. I really don't think you can refer to climate globally. You remember that cartoon with the scientist on the blackboard crossing everything off? And the little boy, what did he write? It's just weather. Okay, what does that mean? That means we can't put these things on a global scale. Climate is regional, local. It is not global, so neither are our environmental problems and concerns. All right, and when we're dealing with local problems, regional problems, or even national problems, they're certainly not global, we can't have global solutions. We need to address individual problems appropriately. So the environment is too complex for us to put all these things together and lump all the problems together and say the government's got to make massive policy changes. Does the government need to make massive policy changes? Of course not. Okay? So the environmental concerns are real, but they're more regional and local. And it's not a crisis that requires US government intervention. Okay? It's not the crisis that they are portraying it to be. All right, so are environmental issues real? Of course they are, but they're overblown, they're not global, and so forth. So let's go through this just a little bit more. Notice this picture. What does it imply? That we have pollution everywhere. You see all these pictures of the planet, right? The whole planet being polluted. All right, it's propaganda. Are there pollution issues? Yes, there are pollution issues, but they are regional. They are not global. Okay? So environmental issues are not global. Environmental issues are not dire. Remember What's the second tactic of environmentalists? Predicting alarming and dire consequences, trying to sway popular opinion so they can have their massive policy overhauls. What does that mean? More government control. That means damage to our economy, and so forth. So, climate change. Eco-justice in our common home. Remember, what does ecology mean? It's the study of the house in which we live. That's its literal meaning when you translate it out of Greek. Then here's the next idea. Environmental issues are not in our hands. Maybe I should have put that the planet is the control of the planet, the sustaining of our planet is not in our hands. Whose hands is it in? God's hands. And we have all these dire consequences being predicted. Keep in mind that if you have a biblical worldview, you know that the world is not going to end by climate change. The world's going to end how and when God ordains it to. Okay? So, let's continue on. What is the true picture? Environmental concerns are regional, not global. Environmental concerns do not require U.S. government intervention. Environmental concerns do not require massive policy overhauls by our government, which of course typically, is it done through the legislature? Mm-hmm. No, it's done through the executive branch this time. All right? We really don't have our nice balance of powers that our forefathers set up. The executive branch takes too much responsibility and control and circumvents the legislature and the judicial system. Of the three, which one is the most responsible to the populace? The legislature. Then, of course, the executive branch, because the president is elected every 4 years, and we do have term limitations. But then the third, of course, is the judicial branch. Here we're mostly involved with the executive branch overstepping its bound. Notice that it called for legislature. What did they call for? Massive policy overhaul. What does that mean, policy? Does that mean environmental laws? No, they're not going to get passed. It means executive order. It means EPA regulations and things that are not directly accountable to the voting population. Then the fourth idea here is that environmental concerns are sensationalized, right? The polar bear. Anytime you look on an environmental website, you're going to see a polar bear. You're also going to see the scorched earth, okay? So environmental concerns are not global. Environmental concerns do not require government intervention. Environmental concerns are sensationalized, extreme. Remember the tactics. All right, so the usual culprits: the news media, entertainment outlets, and educational institutions. Okay, are the source of a lot of our environmental propaganda. And then the last idea, as far as what is the true picture of environmental concerns, is that the earth is a whole lot more resilient than it's given credit for. Okay? There's no need for drastic measures. So we can't view our environmental concerns on a global scale. We can't. And we have to keep in mind that it's a political agenda. We don't need U.S. government intervention. We don't need massive policy overhaul by the executive branch, right? And we have to keep in mind that the news media shows what the news media wants to get ratings, sell magazines, sell papers, or whatever. I don't know how many people still get a printed newspaper. But, and then the educational institutions are indoctrinating the U.S. children in off of another website. This website is called The World Counts. Okay. What do you see in that statement? Our planet is what? Poised on the brink of a severe environmental crisis. Is that true? No. Environmental issues are not global. Okay? Severe environmental crisis. Who maintains direct control over what goes on? God does. Current environmental problems make us vulnerable to disasters and tragedies. Of course, one of the main things you'll hear them talk about over and over again is increased hurricanes, increased droughts, increased, well, I don't know, maybe increased reporting of, and so forth. We are in a state of what? Planetary emergency. These statements are everywhere on the internet. These statements are in textbooks everywhere. They're very similar. We're on the brink of a crisis. This is a planetary emergency. All right? It's simply not true. With environmental issues, what? Piling up high around us. That is not the case. All right, with all those things in mind, let's talk about the three main environmental concerns. If you get on the internet, you can find top 10 environmental issues facing our planet. This is from Planet Earth Herald. So what does that tell you? Planet Earth equals environmentalism. Let me read you those 10, and then we'll talk about the ones I want to talk about. Number 1, population. What are we doing? Blaming the wrong causes. Without a doubt, the biggest issue facing the environment is overpopulation of humans. I guess they want us to be extinct. All other major environmental issues flow from the very fact that we are overpopulating the planet. Okay? More land is developed every day to accommodate the urban spread. Okay, so in 1950, world population stood at 2.5 billion compared to 2012, where it stands at over 7 billion. Okay. Population. If I look at another website, let's see if I can find it. The World Counts. Here's another website, 15 major current population problems. Shall I read what Planet Earth Herald thinks of us? Okay. It says it's very difficult to prioritize the top 10 environmental issues facing our planet today. One thing is for sure, and that is overpopulation is at the root of all the issues. Here's the next sentence. Listen. If we do not act soon to start to curb human breeding patterns, we will almost certainly face an environmental meltdown. What is that? That's extreme environmental. It's very offensive what I just read. Human breeding patterns. What is that a result of? Think it through. Evolution. We're nothing more than animals. Okay? Apparently that's how the environmentalists view humanity. Higher form of animal. So what's the whole problem with this class? With the issues that we're discussing in this class. It all stems from first semester. What did we talk about first semester? Creation. Okay? And so decades of abandoning God in the Bible and embracing evolution. That's the result of this. This is extreme. Okay, then number 2 is climate change from the planet. Number 3, here it is, loss of biodiversity. The loss of biodiversity on the planet can be directly related to the behavior of human beings. What are we doing? We're still blaming overpopulation. We're blaming you and I. Humans have destroyed and continue to destroy the habitats of species on a daily basis. When we exterminate, you hear that verb? When we exterminate one species, it has a knock effect on the food chain, which in turn upsets the ecosystems interdependent on one another. Remember, they don't give Earth any credit, they don't give God, any credit for how complex and how resilient the Earth is. Okay? The current loss of biodiversity is also being named the sixth extinction. Number 4 is harmful effects affecting the phosphorus and nitrogen cycles. That one's kind of boring, but it has to do with too much fertilizer. Number 5, water. Many experts, here we are, what are we doing? We're going back to our scientific consensus. These are all experts. Everything I'm telling you comes from the experts, whoever they are. Many experts believe that in the near future, water will become a commodity, just like gold. Ooh, how expensive is gold? It wasn't that long ago. It's about $1,300 an ounce. It pops up. It's over $1,000 an ounce, right? Actually, I don't pay attention to it. But it used to be, $400. That wasn't that long ago. So I'm not that old. Okay? But many experts believe in the near future, water will become a commodity just like gold and oil. We're going to be having water's futures. And it goes on to the fact that 1/3 of humans have inadequate access to clean, fresh water. By 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will not have access to clean water. Overpopulation, demand, and pollution from industry are to blame. Next is number 6, ocean acidification. Number 7, pollution. Number 8, ozone layer depletion. Overfishing. And number 10, deforestation. Those are 10 from Planet Earth Herald. The world counts. I'm going to go through this one a little bit more detail, so I'll come back to it. Here's another one, 15 major. This one lists pollution as number 1, global warming number 2, overpopulation number 3, natural resource depletion, waste disposal, climate change. Wait a minute. How can number 2 be global warming and number 6 be climate change? Climate change is yet another environmental problem that has surfaced in the last couple of decades. Oh, it occurs due to the rise in global warming. Okay. Oh, which occurs due to an increase in the temperature of the atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil biodiversity is number 7. Deforestation moves up to number 8. Ocean acidification, number 9. Ozone layer, same things. We're seeing them over and over again. Acid rain, water pollution, urban sprawl, public health issues, dirty water, number 14. Genetic engineering. They're talking about modification of food. It's okay to do it to humans, but don't do it to the plants. Don't do it to food, which is inconsistent. All right, so let's talk in a little bit of detail. Environmental concerns, I'm going to highlight 3 of them, or kind of put them together. First of all, pollution. Secondly, resource depletion. Thirdly, species extinction. And we're going to go on to another day's lecture. See how far we get today. We should definitely get through pollution. Pollution, usually these 3, air, water, land. Of course, land pollution can be waste accumulation. It can also be soil. Resource depletion, and especially of those 3, water, oil, and forest. Species extinction. What are they calling it? 6th mass extinction. We'll talk about that in detail. That's very evolutionary. Do you know what the 5th extinction was? If we're on the 6th, does anybody know what the 5th is? It happened 65 million years ago. Dinosaurs. That was the 5th extinction. I should have incorporated the slide with the meteor strike, but I'm going to give it to this now. So let's start with pollution. Air pollution. Any guesses to where that picture was taken? I don't mean specifically what country. Not the US. China. China is the worst polluter, the worst, and they're the ones who've been trying to cut back on their population most. That's from China. Water pollution, garbage. Is that from the United States? I think it's, I'm not sure, so I won't say. Land pollution. Okay. I'm kind of wondering where that picture came from. I don't know. And I'm wondering, is that the result of a tornado? It kind of looks like it to me, but maybe not, because I don't see any trees and stuff, so I don't know. We know they're not above fabricating, right? This is also from China. China has very severe pollution issues, especially air pollution, a lot of health concerns. This is kinds of soil from runoff from industry. So are environmental issues real? Yes, they are. There are pollution issues, but they're in regions, they're not global. Okay, so what is pollution? Here's our definition. Pollution is anything added to the environment that has undesirable and even harmful effects on the ecosystem. Not on the globe, but on the specific region, the ecosystem. So anything added to the environment that has undesirable, if not harmful, effects on the particular region or ecosystem. We can have man-made pollution, which I thought all pollution was man-made, but it is also natural pollution. A lot of our so-called greenhouse gases are naturally occurring. Carbon dioxide coming off the ocean, methane off of cattle, all kinds of problems. So it's not just man-made or industrial type issues. It can also be natural. And all parts of the biosphere can be polluted, whether we're talking the air, the water, the land, or the soil. So pollution is when we add something to the environment that has a harmful effect. It doesn't have to be industrial or man-made. It can be naturally occurring, but in too high of concentrations. Right? Of most concern is air pollution. Air pollution is the most severe because it is often unseen. You saw the garbage for the land pollution. You saw the soil pollution. Air pollution is not always visible like it is in Beijing or LA even, but it's often unseen. And another problem with air pollution is it's difficult to control and correct because we have air currents and air mass movement as part of our weather. And so air pollution does have more far-reaching effects as well. Air pollution can be easily spread to other ecosystems. So air pollution is the most severe and it is the biggest problem. But even air pollution is not global. And of course, it's going to affect other ecosystems. All right, air pollution. Just like with any pollution, air pollution is man-made from industry and car emissions, but it's actually not the one that produces the most. Many natural things change the composition of the air. And so if it changes the composition of the air and it has an undesirable effect, it is classified as pollution. Air pollutants can be gases or even particulates, very small solids that are suspended in the atmosphere. And of course, there's different gases. The most famous is carbon dioxide, even though it's actually not contributor to air pollution, it is a culprit blamed for global warming and climate change. Results of air pollution. Here's what we're dealing with environmentally. You've heard of acid rain. We've got a lot of gases and particulates in the atmosphere. And so when it rains or snows, or you have any type of precipitation, the pH is lowered, which makes it acidic. And of course, this happens regionally. You can see damage even to buildings from acid deposition or acid precipitation or acid rain. Smog. That's when we get trapped air pollution over a small region, particularly cities. I mentioned Beijing, China. I even said LA. And all of that is due to the geographic characteristics around a particular urban area. Climate change, yes, I guess. Climate change is, and respiratory illness, particularly where in cities and in countries like China. What about air pollution in particular? It is a real environmental problem. Don't put your head in the sand. That's not the result of this, the goal of this class. The goal of this class is to put this in perspective and keep it balanced biblically. Local regions, other countries. So do we need massive US policy overall? No. And pollution should not be part of a biblical stewardship. What do I mean by that? I mean, we shouldn't be contributing to pollution on any scale, personally, and so forth. So I'm not advocating going to the other extreme. All right, what about pollution? Solutions to pollution need to be appropriate, not massive policy overhaul. What are some appropriate environmental solutions? We'll talk about these more later, but just in general, they need to fit these three. I think we need to have stewardship, which includes responsibility and accountability, but the main thing we want to be looking for is innovation, new technologies. Allow corporations, maybe give them tax incentives. Allow them to spend money on research and development. Okay? Incentives, tax breaks, not more regulation. More regulation just stifles industry. So if we can direct them into research and development, new technology to combat the environmental issues. Okay? The next environmental concern is resource depletion. So the three main environmental issues that I want to address with the rest of this lecture and most of next lecture is pollution, and then number 2, resource depletion. There's a definition, I guess. What is resource depletion? It's just what it says. We're using up natural resources to the point where less and less is going to be readily available. Okay? And according to many environmental outlets, there are 3 things of most concern with resources: water, oil, and forests. Okay? You heard some of the things that I read to you. Millions and millions of people are not going to have access to clean water. Oil, fossil fuels. We're going to run out of fossil fuels. And you know why we're going to run out of fossil fuels? Because it takes millions and millions of years for them to develop, right? But wait a minute. Who created and controls the environment? God does. Don't you think God is able to allow us to have enough resources? Do you think he doesn't know what's going to happen in the future? So this is not a real concern to us. I don't think obviously we're not going to be wasteful because we have stewardship and accountability to God. But resource depletion is not something that we need to deal with. I'm going to deal with just one resource today, and that is water. Okay, this is coming from the World Counts. The number one on their list is water. What will we drink? What is that? Propaganda, alarmist, dire prediction of dire consequences. Okay, so, whoops, not what I meant to do. What will we drink? Causes of water depletion. There's actually three. Increased irrigation and infrastructure. Whose fault is that? Overpopulation. Too many people. And then rising temperatures. That's global warming. Oh, that's our fault too. Okay. Human activities are using up our water supplies. Consequences. Drinking water shortage, food shortage, famine. Well, let's think a minute about what the Bible says of the end times. Could God use some of these things in the end times? Of course he could. But are we going to do anything about that? No, we are not. So resource depletion is the third main environmental concern. Of the three, we've got water, oil, and the forests. So we will pick up the next lecture with the resource depletion of oil.